Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda, citiesabc, Open Business Council YouTube podcast series. I'm excited to continue profiling some of the leading thinkers and thought leaders and academic people, creating new ideas and new solutions for the world, and reflecting how we can actually make our society a more equal and more sustainable. And as well, how can we look at innovation and technology and finding the best ways to improve all the areas that we have, look at the challenges, but as well the opportunities we have. In our series of interviews, we've been profiling leading personalities of the world academia, of the world politics and governments, and as well, especially the people that are bringing more hope and more ways to look at the crossroads that we have in our moments of history of humanity. So today I'm actually very excited to welcome to our series Professor Xiaolan. Xiaolan, I won't properly spell it, but I'll do my best. So her profile is quite impressive, and she's the Director of Technology and Management Center for Development, TMCD, at the University of Oxford. She's a Professor of Technology and International Development and Fellow of Green College at Oxford University. And through the TMCD, she's responsible for the platform that is quite one of the focus of this interview, that is OxValue.AI. And she's as well chair of the board of the organization behind this platform. She was the president of Chinese Economic Association for Europe and CEA for the UK between 2010 and 2011. And 2015 and 16, she was appointed by the Secretary General of the United Nations to the 10 members high-level advisory group of the UN Technology Facilitation Mechanism and to the Governing Council of the United Nations Technology Bank for least developed countries. Our recent books include China's Path to Innovation, China's Role in Global Economic Recovery, and the Rise of Technological Power in the South. Her papers appeared widely in leading international journals and papers, and she received the European Commission Gate to Growth Academic Network 2005 European Best Paper Award. She currently leads the ESRC DFID funded project on the diffusion of innovation in low-income countries, and an ECFP7, which I'm sure she will explain to us, funded project on the MNEs and development. She's also a senior research associate at the University of Cambridge and a visiting professor at Fudan University, one of the leading Chinese universities. So I think her profile, we can actually go for a lot of things, but one of the things that I want to highlight as well, just as an introduction, is the bridge between the academic world, the research and innovation technological ecosystem, and as well working with leading non-for-profit and for-profit organizations, creating bridges between innovation and how to deal with some of the challenges that we face, especially when it comes to innovation, technology, and development, which is a quite impressive amount of work and bridge of different areas that are not easy to establish. So I welcome to our series, Professor Xiaolan Fu. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Dinis. Thank you for having me.
So it was really a big honor, and I want to start because, well, someone like you that has this amount of work, and as well, I would say a lot of different hats, because managing all of these different things for one person is difficult, but you've been managing like 20 different roles, 20 different areas, and at the same time, keeping a focus that is fantastic and achieve the things that you've been actually creating and managing and as well leading. So I would like to start by an introduction from you, a bit of your background, overview and education, because I know as well that you come from a different culture, you adapt to this culture here in the UK, and of course you're one of the leading, if not the leading university in the world. So it's as well a fantastic achievement, but as well, from a culture perspective, from a background, there's a lot of ways, and I'm sure that you had to work a lot to achieve what you achieved, but as well to manage a lot of different ways of personalities, culture, and backgrounds.
Yes, thank you, Dinis. I come from China, and I have taken my undergraduate degree and my first master degree in China. And later, actually, I came to the UK when I was already 32 with my family. And I studied to, I continued to study my master and also a PhD degree at Lancaster University. So now I'm an academic, have the lucky and the privilege to work, to have been working in two of the most prestigious universities in the world. And in some way different from most of the academics is that I have been working in the business sector for 5 years when I was in China before I embarked on my academic career. So I think that experience for some academics, maybe you lost 5-6 years in accumulating your papers and research outputs. However, it is the most precious experience that I think I benefited a lot in my academic research and shaped what a person I am today. Like you said, I think this is the belief that I think academic research should serve the economy and the society. It is because of this I work not only producing first-class academic research, but also would like to contribute my time and energy to transform the knowledge and into knowledge or policies that can serve the society and the economy. And also this experience helped me to be sharper in capture the major challenges and the important questions, and also helped me to make interpretations of the academic results that bring it much more closer to the reality, to the economy.
Yeah, and I think that is a very critical endeavor that you need to work, is the relationship between the academic, the industry, and society, because you cannot separate things, and especially in our ages, this is going to be more important because, of course, the things go so fast that you can, if you got in one area, then don't get the others, you have a challenge. So I wanted, before I go to your achievement in Korea, I would like still to touch, because I know that studying in China is much more demanding than studying in Europe or in the Western world. So in your case, both studying in China, but then creating a business career and then coming again to the academy. I would like to touch about that, because sometimes people don't see, and of course, especially a lot of people, well, of course, the people on my podcast are quite open for this, but they understand the different innuendos that come from all these different achievements that you have. But I would like to touch the difference you saw between studying in China, studying in the UK, and working as well, of course, with all these leading universities, but as well, the difference of culture and especially development, because in the last 20 years, China became the leading economy in the world, and at the moment is leading both in technology innovation, but probably when you were a child, it was not the case. So there's a lot of development. So you went from a lot of changes and disruption as well, and innovation, let's put it that way.
Again, I think I have been lucky living in this age, in the history, in terms of China, since its opening up in 1978 and over the past 40 years, we see the rapid change, and before the opening up, you see, I already also, when I was a child, I was in China. At that time, it was a low-income country. So for me, it's really seeing the country growing from a low-income country. When I was a child, we have never seen a TV, an electric fan. So that's the time. You see, the car is unimaginable, and see the country changing so fast, and being in it, and experiencing and participating, and also witnessing closely the changes. But also have the lucky to came to the UK to be educated in the, you see, in the world first class institutions, taught and guided by leading scholars, and now working with the world class scholars in such a open and dynamic environment. So I think I have been lucky. However, like you said, there are culture changes, especially for someone who came to the to another country, a very different culture, already in her 30s. So there are challenges. However, my experience is that although there are cultural differences, although people's skin or hair color could be different. However, if we go beyond this, inside each person, a lot of things as a human being are the same. So if we can understand others by putting ourselves in others' shoes, and then it's much easier to understand. I think a lot of basic thinking and our responses and behaviors to various incentives, shocks, many are the same. Although then there are differences, cultural differences, or some difference in terms of value. But I think the fundamental thing for human beings are the same. So try to understand each other, from other people's perspective, and then I think that helped me to understand and communicate with others, and collaborate with others. And also I think, to be nice, to be kind, and to do good things, that's a more universal value that going through the world. When you are nice, you are helpful, you are resourceful, and you can contribute, you work hard, you make values, you contribute. And this, will be recognized. This also, I think there are some universal things across the globe. And also the UK, I think it's an open economy. It's very international. Like in London, more than 60% of the people come from outside the country. So I think that's another thing that I'm lucky, this is a very open, internationalized economy. And Oxford, Cambridge, and the UK system overall, it's a system that allows people with merits to emerge. So there are hierarchy, but you see, then you still see the system that allow people with strong capability with stars to arise. Even in my university, I have many young colleagues who are stars. They rise very fast, rather than in the system you're ranked by age, you see, or by your family background. We have to be honest. It's not perfect. There are still hierarchy. There are still social, kind of groups. However, I think this is still a very open system and open society, and Oxford, Cambridge allows talents to rise. I think that's how one of the factors lead to the success of these universities.
I love the way you put it, because in the end of the day, I think all is the history showed that when you put different talents and meritocratic driven talents in the same city, the cities flourish and become the leading cities in the world. And actually all the cities in the world are the ones that have this multiplicity of talent and meritocracy, which is something that I admire. So I want to touch, so you have a career that is, amazing from different areas that touches, like you mentioned, both the academia, but as well the industry. And as well now you lead the research center in the University of Cambridge, but as well of Oxford, sorry. But you are as well a professor, and you do a lot of work with the industry. So I would like to, from a career highlights, what would be the things that you want to talk to us? And I think that you think, of course, you're still young, and I'm sure you're going to achieve much more. But just to understand some of the things that you've been quite well, I would say proud to achieve, but as well the things that you would like to highlight from your career perspective.
I think from my career perspective, some of the things I have done, I think I'm proud of, are, I think I have been the first scholar from China, especially from mainland China, to be appointed to a kind of to a tenured position first, and later to a professor in Oxford in the social sciences area. So so this is kind of in the 800 years history of Oxford. I have been have the privilege to be the first person from China being appointed to a professor position, and of course being able to be invited and appointed by the Secretary General of the United Nations to the 10-member group for the technology facilitation mechanism, which really is, to enable, it's like a platform enable me to use my knowledge and experience to advise, to serve the society, and lead to changes for good, changes for sustainable development, to make a more sustainable and inclusive society. And later being appointed by the Secretary General of the UN to the Council of the Technology Bank for the least developing countries, which also aims to promote the technological capability in the developing countries, especially the low-income countries. That is something I really want to do, make first-class research and also use it to change the world and to make a better world. I have the lucky to be in such a position, being able to do this. It is an achievement, but I see it more as an honor, as a privilege to allow me to contribute to the world better. Of course, funding the center is still something, and leading the center about 13 years. It's a hard work. It's a hard work. I'm still, working on it. So for me, actually, all the professors in the university, they are very busy. They work very hard. And for me, it seems, like have another full-time job to create a new research center. Need some academic entrepreneurship. So some of my colleagues call me institutional entrepreneur. Yeah, it needs a lot of creativity, energy, courage, and also determination. Because to be a good professor in such a leading university, already very challenging and demanding, and at the same time, managing a center, creating a center, leading it, looking after various aspects. This is something I'm still making great efforts on. Yeah, and that's also a lot of work.
Yeah. No, congratulations. I think it's really impressive. And I think it's just what you mentioned, that in the first 800 years, being a lady and of course coming from China and leading one department and as well being a professor is really a massive achievement. And people sometimes forget that, how difficult it is. So really, it's really impressive. So I want to touch, and of course, all the work you've been doing with the United Nations, that's in itself another achievement of a lifetime. So I want to touch especially So you wrote a couple of books, and two of them was China's Path to Innovation, and China's role in the global economic recovery, and the rise to technological power in the South. So I would like to touch these books because they touch some similar areas, but some of this research, which I know that is critical, and I think is partly some of the things that relate as well to your work with the United Nations and the emerging markets. So if you could tell us a bit, top level, of course, about the books and the research you've been doing on that.
The book, China's Path to Innovation, actually, it's a monograph that's based on my research on China's innovation policy and the management since the reforms up to, around 10 years ago, around 2015. So that's the period that China started to open up, try to exchange technology with markets, and mainly rely on technology transfer and the technological learning to push the industrial upgrading. And then we see a transition to emphasizing indigenous innovation and promote innovation capabilities within the Chinese companies. And so this is a period really representing a lot of developing countries' development paths, from learning from more advanced countries to gradually developing its capability to give more emphasis to indigenous innovation and building its own innovation capability. In this process, I think China has explored and find a path which I call an open innovation system approach. So innovation system is a concept that's developed by several leading scholars like Chris Freeman, Bo Lundvall, and also Stan Metcalf and Richard Nielsen, based on the experience in Europe and the US. And what happened in China is that China's rise happened in the period that we see an increasing integration, global integration and globalization. China opened up and becomes an open innovation system. So in this system, they have a drive from within, but also they benefited greatly from learning from external sources. So they are working on two legs, using two drivers and the two resources and the two markets, domestic and international. So being driven by these two drivers, the markets and the state, and also using the two resources and two markets, it has been able to catch up faster than other countries, catch up with the industrialized countries to where it is now. So that has been the main finding from my from the research China's Path to Innovation. And the other books, one is about the rise of technological power in the South, looks at the rise of technological capability in the emerging markets, not only China. So it's putting international comparative perspective, looking at the experiences of China, India, Brazil, South Africa, and Russia, and to see what are the lessons we can learn from the rise of the emerging markets, what drive their fast economic rise and the technological rise, and what are the differences. So from this research, this is a kind of edited collective volume. So authored by many leading scholars, and I co-edited with Luc Zoiter. And this research also found out the emerging markets has been able to grow up by opening up and also making indigenous innovation efforts. The countries making greater openness benefit more, and the countries make greater indigenous efforts, especially, including a more significant role of the state, have been able to grow faster than others. So this is the book about the rise of the technological power from the South. And the book on China's role in global economic recovery is also a collected volume, was published in 2010, right, I think it's right after the outbreak of the financial crisis, the global economic crisis in 2008. And I think the change of the global landscape in the world, the shifts, the start of the shift of the economic center from the West to the East start from that crisis. And so that book is looking at China's role in the global economic recovery during that 2008 economic crisis. And China has introduced a stimulus, 3 trillion economic stimulus package. And the demand pool has really served as an important engine for the global economic recovery when the US and also the West suffer from the financial and the later the economic crisis. So in that book, we also look at a wide range of the mechanisms, not only trade and investment, but also education and also innovation, R&D, and also productivity, knowledge spillovers to the role of the state. So that's also a book looking at, I think, the start of the change of the global landscape.
And these books are really very important to look at the world as it stands, because we are in the verge of, well, these emerging market economies are becoming bigger than the standard Western economies. For instance, China passed already the US. You mentioned Brazil, that is right now between the 5th and 6th economy. And of course, Africa is coming up. And as well, the young population is there. So as someone that is a professor and of course, one of the leading global universities. So I would like to touch about your work as professor of technology and international development and fellow of the Green Temple and University and College in Oxford.
Thank you, Dinis. Before moving to this, can I also, you mentioned Africa is coming up.
Yes, please.
So
yeah, no,
I want to show you this book, my latest book, Innovation Under the Radar, published by Cambridge University Press. In 2020, so just last year, came out, end of last year. This is a book also based on 10 years work about innovation in Africa. What we have found is that different from some people's perspective that no innovation in Africa, what we found is that this is wrong, this perception is wrong. Africa actually is quite dynamic and the entrepreneurs are innovative, are creative. However, due to the resources and skills constraints, the innovation taking place in that context are mostly of the type under the radar innovation. Under the radar innovation, we call it under the radar because it cannot capture by the traditional measurements like number of patents, number of scientific publications, R&D investment, etc. So those innovations are mostly learning driven, entrepreneurship driven, or individual creativity driven, and also pushed by the need to survive. Entrepreneurs told me, I really remember, I survive because I innovate. So they innovate in order to survive in the competition. And of course, this under the radar innovation won't allow the African countries to leapfrog the innovation gap in the 4th industrial revolution. But there is a possibility. This under the radar innovation, if empowered with digital technology like M-Pesa, they will be able to realize some leapfrog in the digital world. So sorry, yeah, this is
No, it's amazing.
But you mentioned Africa. I think that's one of the future area we should pay attention to, and also we should support innovation in Africa. That's very much related to my work in the United Nations to support the developing countries. Now come back to my work as a professor in the university and a fellow in the Green Templeton College. As a professor, I think one of the main responsibility is to educate and training our students, the young talents. That has been at the heart of my research and work, at the heart of my work as an academic, as a professor at the university. So that involves, teaching the courses from basic economic foundation courses to, more specialized option courses on technology and the industrialization in the developing countries. This has been a very popular option course, which, always, oversubscribed and got very, very positive feedbacks from the students. This also showing that our students are interested to see what role science and technology and innovation can play in development, in helping the developing countries, and how to do this. I think this course really, kind of introduced the wide range of theory and the literature and the analytical tools to equip them to be able to work in the future to either in policy making or in NGOs or in other consultancy work, to be able to in academic research to bring technology and innovation to the center for development. So our students later they move on to be to PhD, to be a researcher, or to work in the government or in the international organizations like United Nations, or in some consultancy in the business sector. I think this knowledge helped them to, especially nowadays in the fourth industrial revolution, really help them, equip them, prepare them to be able to engage with the most pressing issues more effectively.
I'm completely, well, first of all, it's really, the key element is how we push this education and innovation under the radar. I love the concept because it's really, most of the innovation is really under the radar because it's the invisible things, and as well as how we apply that to education. Because one of the things I've been, especially as a teacher, although I don't teach for some time, is the challenge is how the students have to understand this new fourth industrial revolution world that you mentioned, and how to apply this complexity of technology, innovation, and different areas, and to make it empowerment tool and not a way of discriminating, because as we know, this has a lot of different roads that can be open. So I want to touch precisely and going through that. Of course, I have a lot of questions about these things, but I'm going to focus more, keeping more or less under the journey. So you as well have been behind the Technology and Management Center for Development, the TMCD in Oxford. So can you tell us about this center and the work you've been doing there?
So this Technology and Management Center for Development is a new center created in the university, which aims to promote technological and managerial capabilities in the developing world, and to provide deeper understanding of the impact of scientific progress on the society and the economy, and how the developing countries can build up their capabilities to be able to harness the benefits of science and technological progress into their development process. So this center, I think one of the key characteristics is multidisciplinary. It's not purely, economic approach or management approach. We also combine other like anthropology or political or science theories and approach into our analysis. So our researchers and the students come from various backgrounds. So that is one characteristic. And another feature of the center, I think, it's about openness. Having been, doing research, my PhD research actually is looking at trade and the FDI on China's economic development. And later, since I start to work in Cambridge and later in Oxford, one of the main themes always has been about open innovation. How openness can benefit, facilitate knowledge transfer, and the openness can bring people's ideas together, enhance the diversity and sharing knowledge, and creating more creative, groundbreaking new knowledge and innovation to the world. That is also why, I very much like Open Business Council. I like this openness idea. For this center, one of the areas for us has been looking at how openness benefits technology transfer, innovation, and industrialization in the developing countries, and also looking at more at firm level at the same time how open innovation can help the firms, to overcome the constraints and also enhance the creativity, diversity, and create more groundbreaking innovation and catch up with developed countries. And also, we accept people from various disciplines. Our mind is open across disciplinary, and our research really found out this, the greater the openness, thinking and working cross-boundary will promote more groundbreaking novel innovation in the multinational companies. So that is another feature of this center. But all this, like earlier you have been talking about, I have been doing a lot of things. It's very busy, but in my view, they are complementary and they are coherent. The knowledge, will serve the society and the economy, and the inspirations I received from the economy and the society, from the industry, from the business, will also inspire the OxValue. The research behind OxValue also comes from engagement with industry. So they complement each other, and they are coherent with one very focused goal is to see how we can build up the technology and innovation capabilities in developing countries, and how we can use it to serve the economy. And one of the belief for me is that research, innovation, technical progress should serve people, serve humankind, and they should, make good changes. This is a fundamental belief that, I think underlying a lot of decision making, or actions behind my actions.
I subscribe completely. That's partly one of the reasons I started this podcast series, is precisely to discuss these problems. And like you mentioned, I think the open innovation and open business and all these different areas are critical for our world, especially with artificial intelligence taking over the world and the fourth industrial revolution being the most disruptive moment in history of society, let's put it that way. So I want to touch specifically on the area of open innovation, and the fact that you've been working with some of the leading organizations, from the World Bank to OECD, the European Commission, the United Nations that you mentioned, and a lot of other departments, and as well as former president of the Chinese Economic Association for Europe. So I would like to see because one of the challenges that I see, especially as a both thought leader and business person, is the lack of digital knowledge and the lack of technology knowledge. And I'm talking from very high-profile governments, because I think both of us have been working with governments and prime ministers and so forth. But one of the things I found is really the complete lack of knowledge. So in your work, especially as a leading researcher in the world in these areas, how do you try to, first of all, approach these different institutions in terms of innovation? And secondly, making this a practical level, because there's the theory, there's the research, but that is taking to practice. And that's what I love about your work, that you have the two components, and I think it's critical. But I would like to see how you crystallize these different dimensions, because they are very different. Because when you do so much advanced research as you're doing, and then coming down and say, explaining to a government or an international organization that doesn't even know how to use digital. So, and I know that this is really very common. We should not underestimate the lack of digital transformation that most of these organizations have. And as well, we mentioned open innovation, which is a difficult thing, because when you have geopolitics, most of the countries have their own interests. So there's a lot of as well consideration. So I would like to touch that work, because it's really impressive, the diversity of institutions and of course the leading global organizations that have been working and cooperating with.
I think the key linkage, that's, link my academic research with so many international organizations is evidence-based policymaking. So this scientific, evidence from rigorous research is very important. It's very important to inform policymaking, so that they are not just, a few politicians that they wake up one day, come up with a new idea, etc. But instead is really, rigorous policy making, rigorous evidence-based informed policy making. So I think this institution, increasingly, this is the trend to guide policy making, and they are looking for rigorous scholar, rigorous academic thinking and evidence. I think that is how, that link my research work in the university, in the academic world, to the policy makers and policy making in these high-level international organizations or national or governments. So we share the same goal, and then the scientific thinking and also rigorous evidence, I think that's the tool that I can provide to the policymakers. So I think that's a most important link. That is also why I do a lot of field work. Really, I go to Africa, to Bangladesh, to South Asia, to China, of course, to talk to the small business entrepreneurs, talk to the farmers, talk to the housewives, the youth, talk to women entrepreneurs there, and also doing large-scale surveys, scientific rigorous surveys in those contexts to generate very solid evidence from those countries, from the context. I think something stands out, if to say how I have been able to make some different contribution. I think one is scientific rigor. For the research in very difficult condition, in very different situation. So carrying out research like in the low-income countries, in the developing countries, there are people doing this. However, to be able to carry out research to a high standard of scientific rigor, this is something that make it convincing and to be accepted, recognized by a wide range of stakeholders and policymakers. That is one thing. I think make the research to stand out, from the field. And another thing is that some people may think I'm a pure China expert, but actually I'm much wider. I do research in Africa 10 years. Now I do research in Bangladesh, in India, and also I have students working on Latin America. So this kind of broad vision and the coverage, rather than have the knowledge and the experience purely come from one particular context, but instead have a more wider kind of vision and the context, and being able to compare, so that I understand, in what kind of condition some policy or some of the strategy will work. So that's also something. If I want to say something, I'm different. That's another difference. I'm more international and more kind of driven by the topic, rather than I purely work on one country with a regional kind of, pure one region focus.
Yeah, and really impressive, because of course we're talking about OECD, United Nations, and all the biggest organizations. And I think I love that passion that you have, but as well that cross multidisciplinary, but as well cross discipline and cross geography. Because I think that's a big challenge when it comes to research, is that very easily, if you don't put it in a global context, you can actually get data that is a bit contradictory, and you can get in rabbit holes that we have a lot, especially with the media and kind of the fake news and a lot of different things that are ironically, using technology, very advanced technology, to create some dystopian realities. So I want to go to the work you've been doing with OxValue.AI. So just as a small introduction, so OxValue.AI is a big data company originated from the groundbreaking research from the Technology and Management Center of Developing at the University of Oxford, and offers a novel way to determining the monetary value of a technology pre- and post-patent grant, to fill a significant gap in existing methods and potentially creating a decision-making tool for investors. So I would like to talk about this because, of course, this is probably the biggest, one of the biggest things when it comes to business and to investors and startups is, okay, why should I invest in this company and not another one? Is my money is going to be, and of course it's not for investors as well, is it for countries, for developing, for institutions like foundations, World Bank and so forth. This is very big. So I know that you did a lot of work to come up with this. It was released recently. So if you could tell us, first of all, what is OxValue on your own words, and as well how you expect to take it to the world and to make it a global standard for evaluation of companies, and especially business and startups.
OxValue is a social enterprise which was, set up based on some innovative research carried out at the TMCD Center at the University of Oxford. So its aim is to provide an innovative tool for the valuation of technology and the startup companies based on big data, and also the techniques of machine learning and also econometrics. And it is data-driven, data-based methodology, but also it is guided by a new novel analytical framework about the value of technology, about the value of intellectual properties. So this company aims to provide an innovative tool to serve both the investors and the inventors, and also the governments at various levels and international organizations, to provide them a tool which is objective. I think that's the key feature, and also accessible and affordable. This will overcome some of the significant limitations that with the existing methods for technology valuation, which could mostly are subjective, but also often very expensive, costly, and hence, not being available to the wide community. And so this OxValue.AI aims to provide a new tool, which will provide a new tool, which are objective, affordable, and accessible to all the investors, the inventors in the university, in research institutes, and the governments, national, regional, the cities, governments, and also some international organizations like World Bank or United Nations, European Commission, etc.
So I want to touch that because, of course, me as both an investor and as a startup person, I've been actually finding all the struggling of, first of all, even in the companies that I'm managing, the valuation. And first, you mentioned, so there's a component of econometrics, a component of machine learning. And first, I know that you're looking at patents, at trademarks, IP, a lot of different things, and management. Can you just go a bit more granular on this? Because it's one of the things that I think for all the people listening to us, and for instance, in the UK alone, there's 5 million, close to 6 million SMEs and startups. And worldwide, we're talking about 400 plus million micro SMEs and startups. Of course, startups are much smaller, but this is a big thing. And especially if I'm a country like, well, you mentioned Bangladesh or Africa, the startups can be the ones driving innovation, both the under the radar or mainstream radar. But how do you see, for instance, companies, and even me, for instance, I struggle. One thing is me as a researcher or academic or thought leader, and the other thing is me as an entrepreneur. And what I find is it's very difficult to learn how to put this kind of, the way you present the company. For instance, there's platforms like Crunchbase, PitchBook, and so forth that are right now doing a fantastic work to create solutions on that, but they're still very driven by the VCs, by Silicon Valley. And if you get outside of the scope of Silicon Valley, outside of the scope of even, we are in London, of course, which is one of the leading cities in the world, or New York, but you immediately get a bit diffuse. So I would like to see, and I know as well that you have a big component on the emerging markets, and even the tool is for free for these countries. So if you could elaborate a bit more on this.
So exactly as you said, the SMEs, the small business, the startups are very important players in the economy. They are actually, one of the major forces that drive innovation in the country. In the UK, US, in China, they are major players that drive innovation. However, the whole innovation and process, from R&D to technology transfer, commercialization to scale up, and also in terms of the SME growth, from SME to a middle-sized company to large company, there is a major step, which is, some people will call a death valley. For the technology, for the startups, there's a death valley, and for the SMEs, there is a very critical period. You see, from SME, majority will fail, and only a few can grow up to large companies. And one of the bottleneck in this process is that they need more investment to support its growth, to be able to scale up and also grow and going through this death valley. And the investment is very much needed. However, for investors, due to the information asymmetry and also the complexity of technology, so for investors, very naturally, they will concern about, how much I should invest in this startup company or this technology which is ready to be commercialized and scale up. So this hesitation, this information asymmetry leads to the hesitation, and also leads to the less investment than it should make to the startups, to the SMEs, and therefore this tool aims to unblock this bottleneck, and also to push down the wall that exists in the growth process of the SMEs. And what we are looking at is that our step first is to develop analytical theoretical framework based on some long-standing theories to define what's the value, monetary value of a technology or of a startup. We start from thinking about the monetary value of technology. Of course, it's really the utility it serves defines its total, its monetary value. And this utility it serves, first is the market it serves, the market size, and also how much you serve. Also, then the second factor is the novelty. Whether you solve a new problem, provide a new solution or provide a better solution. So the market it serves, the novelty of the technology, that's the second factor. The third is about, whether it needs complementary technology to enable it to fully achieve its value, or whether there is presence of such complementary technology. In addition to this, investment always, accompanies risks. The risks along the way to control, to take into account, and finally, for startups, the management characteristics of the startups are also very important, like the team, like the business model, etc. So these are the factors that we have, taken into account in this analytical framework, and based on this, then we brought in, various data sets. That's why we linked them together, to form a big data set. For each technology that we consider in a specific startup company, So that's, and then we use econometric techniques to develop an empirical tool, and also we used machine learning and other techniques to validate this tool. We carried out a lot of robustness sensitivity tests to see how this model works for various samples of startups of different age, different sector, etc. And also in this process, like you said, we realize each industry may have, will have different different characteristics of technological development. So we are doing this industry by industry to fully taking into account the differences of each industry in its technological development. And so we did for ICT digital sector, we did for the pharmaceutical sector. We're also working on the medical devices, and in the future we'll do renewable energy, chemistry or automobile industry, etc. And also you mentioned different countries will be different. So we are also testing this, looking at how different markets, the regulations, consumer preferences, culture will affect this valuation. So we have done a comparison of the same sector between the UK and the US. Our main analytical framework still valid, works well, although there are some adjustments in the coefficients in the algorithms. Also this suggests like the US, Europe, UK, they are more or less, more kind of open markets with the open flow of ideas and the knowledge and the capital. More or less in these markets, this algorithm will work well. If we want to more accurate, more precision, higher precision, we can, like use the US model to make some adjustment on the coefficients. But this tool works, is valid for the developed country market. In the future, for the emerging markets as one group and the low-income countries as another group, we will consider different market and the country context and make adjustment. So in order to make this tool more accurate for different country groups,
And I think this is going to be definitely one of the most important things for the innovation around countries, around the investment organizations, and especially for the economical metrics, because the economical metrics are key. So this brings me to a question they have related with this, and I know that that there's a lot of work in terms of the way you've been putting on this and a lot of research. But from the metrics that you have, and as well as the tool, and actually the website is OxValue.AI. So using machine learning and research, and you mentioned that you're starting by different verticals, and then you gather more and more data, and of course looking at geolocations and so forth. So can you tell us how the machine learning AI part of it works, and how, let's say, an emerging market or a government can use the tool, or an investment fund? I know that is in the beginning, but I'm sure that you have a roadmap how to take it forward.
Thank you, Dinis. Exactly. Yeah, we are at the beginning, and we are developing, and keep on developing a wide range of more accurate algorithms for different industries and different countries. So for the machine learning, what we are doing is, we are dividing the sample into different sub-samples. We have the training sample, and we have the testing sample. We are using our methodological framework, apply this with the training sample, and we get an algorithm, and we apply this to the testing sample. And what we found is that the algorithm we developed based on the testing sample still work for the testing sample. So the algorithm we developed from the training sample still work well with the testing sample. The the accuracy is about 80%. So the estimation and the true value, what we have seen is the accuracy rate is 80%. And also, we have also tested this tool to subsamples with younger startups and elder startups, like 1 or 2 years old startup and 3 to 5 years startup. What we find is that this tool is more accurate with younger startup. The explanatory power of the tool is about 95% for the subsample with younger startups, and it's about 75 to 80% for the elder startups. So on average, it's 85% of the variance in our sample can be predicted, can be explained by the model, by the algorithm. I think the younger startup, the tool is more powerful, more accurate, because less noise, much less noise. Because when the startups grow to 3 or 4 years old, there are other intangibles coming, like branding or some others noise coming. For the younger startup, like branding or other intellectual properties, still at very infancy stage. So for those younger startups, the predictive power is about 95%.
And as well, I think it's really something that it can make a big difference, especially how, for instance, one simple example is how governments look at metrics around economics, development and innovation, and even for education. Because if you start getting an understanding that these companies tend to get more funding or are more necessary, we can actually shift a lot of things related to education and things like that. Of course, it's about the way we're putting data together. I'm cautious about your time, but I still have a couple of questions. So touching on this and now going a bit broader, and I'm particularly interested on your views on how you mentioned fourth industrial revolution for AR. And of course, there's as well the concept of society 5.0 And there's as well, of course, all the areas of innovation around artificial intelligence. So I would like to see your views around this, especially as a researcher, but as well as a scientist and as well an academic that is using these tools. And how you see this, especially when it comes to digital transformation. And I would say, especially picking in what we discussed right now with the OxValue.AI. So one of the biggest right now trends is around ESG. So environmental governance and sustainability, or social impact, depends on the way you take it together as well. So how do you see this combining forces of the, in one end, artificial intelligence and all the frontier technologies that we are working, that actually have the capacity to create singularity and a lot of things in the next couple of years. Then we have Society 5.0, that is a balance, which is partly what you've been describing as well, the balance between the different parts. And of course, then in one end, we have ESG for investment, which tools like yours can actually be critical to improve our society. So I would like to see your views, and I know that you're doing a lot of work, precisely you mentioned that, but especially from an academic and ideological perspective, because these tools are already creating a lot of disruption, and I'm sure that they can actually create a more balanced kind of vision of society, or more imbalanced. So I would like to see how you look at this from a social, well, in this case, probably Horat as a researcher and scientist.
Thank you, Dinis. That's a very important question. I think we are now at still the start of a new wave of industrial revolution, and also for artificial intelligence and the revolution and disruptive change that's being brought by artificial intelligence, I think still at the start. We are yet to see the full picture. I don't know who can see, what's the really fully, foresee what the future looks like. I think still very challenging to make full prediction. However, I think one thing is quite sure, is that the change will be transformational and disruptive. The future society and the relationship between society and the artificial intelligence and the technical progress, I think we will see a world has more integration of human, and of human being and human wisdom and artificial intelligence and also technical progress. Like in robots, we may see, a kind of coordinated human and industrial robots coordinated kind of paradigm, rather than a pure robots dominated paradigm. I don't see this will be the future, but more will be a kind of human and the robots coordinated kind of technical paradigm. On the one hand, is that, as I said, innovation for good, technical progress for good. I think that's the principle. That's the principle. And also, we need to, if we don't use the word of guiding technical change, then we should at least about incentivizing and encouraging the right direction of technical change and the innovation. And the human still should be, the one in control of the technical change and the future technology. So that's why I think there is a necessity about the coordination between the human and intelligence and the human power and the technical change. And another thing is actually human being. I see a lot of power of human being. Our brains, works now. I think amazing in an amazing way. Why I say this? There was a kind of exhibition. There was an exhibition. I was, looking at some robots carrying out some wood cases to move this to a kind of shelf. The robot is doing like moving, kind of adjusting position and the height, moving slowly. And I was thinking, if this action to be taken by a human being, just 1 second, our brain will complete all the calculation and guide our body to accomplish this action. And however, the robots need to take a lot of calculation and also time to accomplish. So I think the beauty of our human brain, we should really appreciate. And I think this is still an area that we need to fully explore. So that's another way another reason why I say in the future will be a kind of human power and wisdom and artificial intelligence coordinated world, a much more coordinated world. Humans will be liberalized, from a lot of work that we don't want to do, and we will have much more time and energy and resources to do the work that are more creative or we enjoy more, and the productivity and efficiency will be increased because of the technical change, the use of artificial intelligence and the other disruptive innovations brought by all this technical change, not only in digital science, but also in life science, in other fields. And another area is that in such kind of coherent, coordinated world, we will also make sure the world is cleaner and more sustainable. So this is where the ESG should come in. It should come in from now on to make sure all the technical change towards more prosperous and enjoyable world are sustainable and also harmonized with the nature, and it's sustainable. I think all this should come together, and the research on science, technology, policy, and the management, and the OxValue will help the decision makers. The investors are decision makers. The governments are decision makers. The companies which going to acquire small startups, they are decision makers too. They, should make sure first is their investment are making to the direction, boosting the innovation and the technical change to make a better world, a more eco-inclusive world. That is one. And also make sure their investment are efficient. That's another challenge for all the investors and the governments. We are now living in a world, people are talking about patent explosion. People are talking about invention explosion. We see the new changes every day, and many are needing an investment. However, so this poses a question, very important question for the policymaker, decision makers, is how to choose the right project, how to make the right investment, how to make more efficient investment rather than waste money. So this OxValue will, and this valuation tool will provide a tool which give you a more independent, objective evaluation, a benchmark to guide the decision, to assist the decision-making process, And because it's big data-based, valuation tool, actually, in another way, I would say it is a market. It is a market because thousands of companies in one industry and the millions of companies in one country. This is really, market. That's the market value we estimate it, and also based on history, rather than created from, a subjective kind of imagination. And this will also help us to overcome another bottleneck in technology valuation, is that we lack of experts with the knowledge of both the most advanced technology and also the most recent development of the market. Some people will tell me that in the 5G area, the whole Europe only have 15 experts really understand the field. So only 15 experts really understand the field. So this is a resource constraint for us to, evaluate all the new innovations that take place across the world. And this OxValue tool, OxValue.AI valuation tool, is a big data-based artificial intelligence techniques enhanced evaluation tool. This is like a AI doctor based on huge data. So its age is like, when we talk about artificial AI doctor, it's about a doctor at the age of 40 years old already, with that experience, because supported by the big data. So this OxValue.AI valuation tool is about, an valuation expert with 35 or 40 years experience in the field, because supported by the historical data and the big data that we collected. So this can also help us to overcome the resource constraint in lack of enough experts to do the technology valuation in a very frontier focused area. So this is another way that this OxValue can help the innovators, help the investors and the decision makers to overcome all the information asymmetry, build up the trust, and boost their confidence, build up their confidence, and make more investment that is much needed to support innovation and the commercialization of the technology, and help the SMEs to get the resources to grow and going through the death valley.
The breakthrough that we need, and I think it's more important than ever. So I want to come back to, and I think we are passing 1 hour now, so probably I'll let it go in a while. But so one of the last questions is coming back to your book, Innovation Under the Radar. And I think it's a fantastic book and a lot of research. Actually, I put it here in my list of books to read. So what, and I think especially I'm particularly interested in the work that you did with emerging markets, and I think looking at this kind of adaptive innovation, let's put it that way, and because each country, or let's say entrepreneurs in Africa, have to work in a way completely different from entrepreneurs in the UK, or even if they are in London or outside of London, if they are in Bangladesh, like you mentioned, or other things. So I would like to touch a bit that, because so this is a book by Cambridge University Press, and it touches a lot of these different things. But I would like to understand from your research and how you apply this to businesses and how you bridge this. Because, for instance, I've been working a lot in emerging markets, and of course, it's more than anything about people and networks, but it's as well about the capacity to adapt. And it's very different because each country has different cultures, and they will do this. And I think looking at, especially from Google Books and some of the things that there's information about the book, is that investigating the nature, drivers, and sources of innovation in Africa, this book examines the channels for effective diffusion of innovation in and to Africa under institutional, resource, and affordability constraints. So I would like to touch that, and if you could elaborate more on this last book of yours.
I think this under the radar innovation is also very relevant for the emerging economies too. This can solve one of the puzzle. Why this emerging economy? Some people will say the BRICS, and actually now it's not only the BRICS, there are other emerging economies in the world. Why they can grow faster? Why they grow so fast? Well, according to the traditional data, they have no innovation. The theory suggests that innovation is a main driver of economic growth. Why these countries can grow faster without this traditional type of innovation? Actually, is that there are innovations taking place in these countries. These innovations are the under the radar type. So they are not captured by the traditional indicator, but does not mean there are no innovations in these emerging countries. They are many are learning based, many are entrepreneurship based, and also many are business model innovation, which also cannot be captured by R&D data. And also there are a lot of a lot of other management innovations. What we found, like even in Africa, is there are a lot of non-technological managerial or marketing innovations, especially for the firms constrained by financial resources, but driven by entrepreneurship. Because of lack of financial resources, they don't have the resources to invest in R&D lab, in research and development, but driven by the entrepreneurship and the individual creativity, they are adopting or even developing new management practices or marketing practices and the strategies to boost their company. So there are a lot of non-technological innovation, which we can also say they are type of hidden under the radar innovation taking place in the developing countries. So these are very relevant for the SMEs, not only in the developing country, but also in the developed country too. The SMEs, most of them face resource constraint and skills constraint, but they benefit from the entrepreneurs who created and lead these SMEs, this small business. So thinking about management, marketing, organizational innovation, thinking about creating or adopting new business model, and also learning from others. This also will help all these SMEs and startups to grow and be more competitive. So this is also one of the relevance of this under the radar innovation for many of the firms in the developing countries and also for the SMEs in the developed countries. And also I want to say, the groundbreaking innovation is very costly and risky. We need it very much, but in reality, they are highly concentrated in a few groups of, in small groups of countries, and also concentrated in a small group of companies. Even in the UK, in the US, many of the firms are, they are still innovating. They are carrying out the innovation which are under the radar type. They are learning, they're making some creative adoption and adaptation of the new technology that they learned from elsewhere. Innovation diffusion is very important. It's very important. So for the policymakers at national and city, regional level, to create, and facilitate, create the platforms and institutions and introduce policies to facilitate the innovation diffusion and to boost more under the radar innovation for the rest of the companies in the world are very important. Well, with appropriate protection of intellectual property, so that we are encouraging the innovators while using policies to facilitate innovation diffusion. This is the same as today in the COVID-19 pandemic. We need vaccines. However, we need, we have leaders in the world who have the knowledge and intellectual property to produce vaccine. However, to address, to win the battle of this pandemic, we need many countries and many people to have access to vaccine. And then we need this production capacity and the diffusion of the innovation, the vaccine, technology to many countries. So for those countries and those firms, that will be learning type under the radar innovation instead of, R&D and patent based on the radar innovation.
Congratulations, first of all, is really impressive. So one last thing, you touched COVID, and I want to touch that because like you are in the university that actually developed the AstraZeneca, which was the vaccine that I took. And I think, of course, that's the first, I would say one of the first times in history, at least for a so big scale vaccine that was developed partly in one of the leading universities in the world. Of course, there's always academic research, but I'm talking really in the short term that, of course, COVID was only in 1 year, and there was a vaccine that is being used on a global scale. So I would like to touch that really. How do you see, and I know that you have more experience than most of the people in the world in that area, is this bridge between the academic world, the industry world, and as well the policy making that you mentioned, but as well society at large? Because I think that's, for me, the way we should go, and I kudos to your work, but as well I admire a lot, but as well I think we need to take it further to society, because it's the only way to create a society that is more balanced and less dystopian, and I think we very easily can go in that direction. So I'm always trying to be positive, but as well as if you could highlight this work that you've been bridging between all these different areas.
I think the success of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is a very good example of the university industry collaboration, and backed up, by government support. So this is really an example to see how the academic world should work hand in hand with industry to create the groundbreaking innovation in the world and bring it to generate impact. The production of the vaccine and the provision to the people, I think that's the impact, the true impact on the world. And I know my colleagues in Oxford, they worked very hard during the pandemic, even, at the high time of the pandemic, they are working day and night to develop the vaccine and raising, against the virus. But of course, Oxford also benefited from the long history and a strong foundation in the research, its strengths in medical science, because they already have this, strong foundation and the research capacity, and so they can respond quickly, very quickly to the pandemic. Oxford is the first in the world to announce they have developed a vaccine for COVID-19. So although there are different technological pathways, different technological routes for different types of vaccine, but Oxford is the first one to announce that they have successfully developed a vaccine for COVID-19, and they quickly, liaised with AstraZeneca, build up such kind of collaboration. I think the colleague who successfully bring these two giants together to form a partnership is also amazing at this difficult time. Because of the pandemic, everybody are locked down. You have to work remotely, and also need to have a producer in India too, to produce this vaccine. So all this shows the collaboration and the partnership so important between academia and the industry. And in this case, the government support to facilitate this also important. Actually, I did a report for the United Nations on partnerships in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which was launched in March this year at the UN high-level conference. Actually, I interviewed 9 partnerships during the pandemic. Many are, several of which are research-based partnerships. And what we have seen is that partnership is play a very important role to allow the communities from different sectors, from different countries, to work together to address a global pandemic effectively. And the digital technology become instrumental to allow this to happen. And the trust and the shared common goal and also flexibility are very important parts. And in these partnerships, we see a lot of being supported by governments and the international organizations, especially providing funding support And also we see important role played by the private sector. That's also very, very impressive. I see quite a lot of partnerships which the private sector either played a leading role or as a valuable partner. And these academic scientific inputs are critical too to address the pandemic, especially those in immediate response to the pandemic. So scientific research inputs are very important. They become very important partners in these partnerships.
So, well, I'm completely passionate about what you just said. And I want to touch as the last one, and I'll leave you. I'm sure you need a break. So from the areas of your current research, you touch most of them is so the M&E Merge project, that is the global developing of emerging markets, and as well the evaluation that you mentioned in terms of OxValue, understanding innovation in low-income countries. We touched that about Africa, diffusion of innovation in low-income countries. I would like to touch the last one. You touched partly on this, but I think this is probably a last way, and of course feel free to develop on this. So you've been working a lot about the role of internationalization on technological capacity upgrading in developing countries. So if you could evaluate a bit more on this, because I think this for me is the most important thing, but as well, we could relate on this at internationalization as well as a way of, first of all, create technology for good, we should touch ESG, and as well somehow facilitating a lot of the issues that we have in terms of the world economy, different velocities. So I would like to touch a bit how you doing research in here, and there's a lot of papers, and we're going to put links for that during the interview, and there's your Wikipedia page, there's a lot of information from your Oxford, the different departments links. But I would like to touch this last one as a way of wrapping up, and of course combining all the amazing work you've been doing and you're doing.
So actually, from my research on innovation in the low-income countries in Africa, what we found is that in comparison to the countries in Southeast Asia, the African countries, there are some differences. One is, relatively weaker role of the state in Africa in comparison with Southeast Asia, especially East Asia, and also much weaker role played by the multinationals in knowledge transfer and the diffusion in Africa in comparison to Southeast Asia. So African countries benefit much less from multinationals in terms of knowledge transfer and innovation. And the third is about their participation in the global value chain. It's much less, in comparison with the firms in Southeast Asia. African countries participated much less in global value chain, very little, and some of them participate in regional value chain. And also university industry linkage for African countries is also much weaker than in comparison with other developing countries in Southeast Asian economies, etc. So multinationals, in theory, could be a very effective vehicle to facilitate technological and managerial knowledge transfer to another country. And from the success of the Southeast Asian dragons, from the Asian tigers, what we have seen is that multinationals can play a very an instrumental role. Then what's happening in Africa and the low-income countries? What's happening there? What are the problems? What are the bottlenecks? And so that's the research for M&E Merge. M&E Merge looking at the role of multinationals for sustainable development. In the context of Africa, the research mainly focuses on the knowledge transfer, especially managerial knowledge transfer to African players, firms, and also employees. And also another interesting question is that in recent 10, 20 years, we see the rise of multinationals from the emerging economies, from China, from India, from Brazil. So this is another new trend. How these multinationals from the emerging economies differ from the traditional multinationals from Europe and the US? So this is another question. So this M&E Merge try to see how multinationals play the role in knowledge transfer, especially managerial knowledge transfer to the African countries, and also what's the difference between Chinese and the European multinationals. So in this research, we have chosen 4 Chinese multinationals and 4 European multinationals in 4 industries. So it's 4 pairs, and compare them. And what we have seen is very interesting. The multinationals are transferring knowledge to the local indigenous employees and the managers within the multinationals through training and also, business and social interactions networks. However, the inter-organization, inter-firm linkages is very weak. It's very weak, which hindered its knowledge transfer to the local firms. And we also see interesting differences between European and the Chinese multinationals. The European multinationals has a more kind of decentralized structure, while the Chinese multinationals has more centralized kind of structure in terms of business and social interaction and organization. And for the local managers, they benefited from this decentralized structure in European multinationals, because they are already, have with work experience, they are educated. With this freedom and the decentralized structure, they are empowered and they learned more. And while for the blue collar workers, many are, previously are farmers, or they have never been working in the industrial organization before. They benefit more from more centralized, hands-on, close engagement kind of structure style in Chinese multinationals. They benefit from more kind of interactions with their colleagues or supervisors in the Chinese multinational. And we also see the barriers for knowledge transfer in African economies. I think language barrier, cultural barrier, in particular for the Chinese multinationals, exist much stronger than the European multinationals. However, the lack of absorptive capacity in the local economy, in the local firms, persists challenges and the barriers for both European and the Chinese multinationals. And finally, I think the role of the state is somewhat weak, and even sometimes absent in the African context. In the Southeast Asian economies, government policies, trade policy, industrial policy, etc., will require technology transfer and encourage this. And in the African countries, I think the African government has been less active and assertive in requiring and encouraging knowledge transfer from the multinationals to the local companies. So government should also be more proactive in the African countries too.
Yeah, this is probably the most important thing, but I think all this different research shows the possibilities and the ways we can actually, well, change the world and make a lot of differences. So I want to thank you for your time. We passed almost the 2 hours. So there's a lot of more questions that I have, but probably we'll do a new one, probably about OxValue.AI and other things. But first of all, well, congratulations for your excellent work. I think you make the world definitely a much better place. And I know that you keep moving and taking a lot of things and making it practical, things that I admire a lot. So we'll put all the links to both your research, your books, and of course the OxValue.AI and the different departments. And of course, I want to thank you for all of this, and I'm sure that you're going to have much more follow-up. It's an honor.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure. Thank you, Dinis. Really a great pleasure. And your questions are inspiring.